Okay, I'm ready to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Quisenberry.
Here.
Rosales. Schwartz. Hartke.
Here.
Kibler.
Here.
Maxwell. James.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Okay. Do we need approval of the minutes from the meeting on February the 5th?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then we need the approval of the minutes from the facility special meeting held on February the 20th. Motion?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, everything's approved. Now we need approval of agenda and addenda if we have any. I don't think we have any, but Alan, you said there might be a change.
Yes, on item 8, we need to change that to just to approve the courthouse exterior maintenance RFP. We do not need to send that to the Finance Committee. And on number 9, approve the recommendation that we applied for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity grant for the Public Sector Energy Efficiency Program. That will go to Finance for their approval to submit. Is that correct, Deb? If this committee wants us to do that.
So you're saying leave that one as is, approve recommendation to finance, or strike recommendation to finance?
You don't need, typically, grants just go to finance.
Okay.
So we don't want to set a precedent where it has to come to another committee before it goes to finance, but it's here for this committee's information because this committee is extremely interested in these types of grant opportunities. So it's presented tonight really for your information.
So it's an info only. It's
And
not-
when it's ready, it won't go to finance in March. As I understand it, Alan will bring it to finance in April, but he wanted to make you aware of it.
So it's more or less an info.
Right.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes, questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Public participation. Anybody here wanting to speak? Okay, hearing none. Communications. I don't have any, other than it's snowing, and we're going to go rather fast tonight.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
other communications?
At everybody's seat, they'll see a draft agenda, potential draft agenda for the study session on energy efficiency. If you have edits, ideas, other people you'd like to speak, please let me know.
And when is that date? It's not on there.
March 26th at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Any other communications? Okay, communications are closed. Moving right along. Alan, you want to take this next one?
Actually, I'd prefer to leave that to Deb. That's Deb's recommendation for the funding options for the, that this committee approved for the recommendation for the funding roof replacement projects.
This is building off of the discussion you had last month with regard to the roof replacements, and this provides you with some different funding scenarios that you could adopt. Typically, option A basically would start the process by amortizing the cost of all of these roofs and making sure the money is there when they're to be replaced. And as you can see, at a little over $600,000, that's a rather large hit for the general corporate fund to absorb in fiscal 2014. So from there, 3 other options were developed. Option B is to fund only what needs to be replaced in 2014 and then amortize in 2015 and beyond, which you see creates a huge spike in fiscal year 2015. Option C basically only replaces the bridges that need to be replaced in 14, 15, and 16, and then begins amortization after that. And there's still some jumping in terms of the budget. And then option D, building off option C, Basically, we just take the the roofs that need to be replaced in 14, 15, and 16 and amortize those 3 years so that we have an even number for those 3 years, and then begin the amortization of the rest of the roofs after that, which does allow a drop. So that is probably the least difficult option for finance to be able to appropriate the funding for these roofs, and that is the option that I would recommend you can consider.
I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Anybody have any questions or anything? Rachel?
Yeah, that's a question for you. When we say that there is money left in the fund, does that really mean cash, or is it simply that something was appropriated at the time and then it wasn't spent? Just
Are you
it's a
talking
general
about-
question. I mean,
Are you talking about the courthouse fund,
well, in this
construction
particular
fund?
case, but yeah, but
The
more
courthouse
generally.
construction fund, the money is there. It has
There's real
not been
cash flow.
There's
there-
no cash flow. That money is left over from the construction of the courthouse. It was not spent. And
Okay.
so it is money that is there and available for any facility-related construction-type issues for the courthouse. And until it's spent, as we spend it, it goes down. You're going to look at the RFP for the exterior renovation, that's $125,000. We
Right.
think this year it goes down then. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we borrow from that to minimize the hit on the general corporate fund if we wanted to choose any of these other options like A and so on?
You
Or that's-
certainly could do that, but
Okay.
then if you,
So there is
I don't
real
think-
cash there? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it like bookkeeping funds, or is it real money that's
it's
there?
real money, it's
It is real
cash. If you
money.
look at the treasurer's report, you'll see that cash is sitting in the
Okay.
courthouse construction fund.
Okay, thank you.
So kind of pursuing that question a little bit further, option D looks good as far as flat and consistent and spreading that cost over 3 years. That's how we would budget, but how's that actually gonna work when we really have, between $600,000, $700,000 worth of work to do in those first 2 years? How's that going to play out in reality?
If you look at option C for the general corporate fund, it actually has to spend $164,500 in 2014, $391,616 in 2015, $385,609 in 2016. That's just to replace the roofs that need to be replaced in those 3 years, each of those years. When you equalize it, so we'll put $313,908 in the capital asset replacement fund facilities budget in fiscal year 2014, and some of that money is going to go towards the $391,000 that needs to be spent in 2015. So we reserve what we don't spend in the current year for future years.
So, sorry.
Well, I was just going to make a comment on what Deb said. So basically, the way I understood it and the way I've done budgets is you build it up a little, and then you have some carryover, much like the courthouse now has. And I just wanted to let this group know, if you go back online and you look back at other meetings, that money that is sitting there for the courthouse construction has been looked at before. And it was back in those days, back in 2011, 2010, because I have some of the old minutes here, it was decided to leave that money there because of the ongoing cost at the courthouse and what have you. I don't know if we should be really drawing on that money. It may sound like a lot at this time, but I know when we've done necessary repairs over there, 200,000 is a drop in the bucket. And there's issues there that we may need. So I would suggest that this group, if you have money sitting somewhere that's nice and secure, unless we have a dire emergency, that we leave that money there. What Deb is proposing, in my mind, makes a lot of sense to me, that we start setting aside this money. And again, I go back to the minutes, because we've talked about a capital plan for some time. It goes all the way back to 09, 08, that we finally start doing this. And then as the work comes due, I mean, if, in Alan's judgment and others, I mean, if we need to prolong it another year to have that reserve built up, we can do so. Those are just numbers that are sort of fluid, and that was my understanding of it when I looked at it. Any other questions? Rachel?
I think this is a good idea because we need to put money away. First question, since budget is considered to be so tight, where will this money will come out of general corporate? Are there any specific line items we know that are gonna have to be cut because this money's coming out?
Not at this point.
Okay, just an advanced question, I figured that was the answer. The other thing is, I have a little concern, though, with this being a specifically roof-dedicated fund. We're gonna have a lot of probably maintenance expenditures, and in my mind, maybe there's a reason for this, but rather than having, a roof fund, an HVAC fund, whatever fund, because we're gonna start looking at those things in the future, maybe we just need to create a capital improvement and maintenance fund in general and start putting money in that for general use and we can look at planning it and amortizing it for specific roofs and other things, but, just have it as a general fund rather than specifics.
This is not going into a fund specific for roofs.
Okay.
There is a facilities department budget in the capital asset replacement fund.
Okay,
There is money in the facilities department budget now, but there's not much left.
Right.
Because we've basically spent
Okay.
it all. So this is a beginning of making sure that we are appropriating at least what we need for roofs.
okay.
And I would suggest that we need to add and build on this, what we need for HVAC systems and exterior maintenance, but we don't have those numbers yet. So at least this is a starting point. We have not even begun, so this is a starting point.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to hear.
I'm going to play an advocate for actually option A, because as we all indicated, we'd like to have a nice fund balance now. And option A actually starts putting things in reserve for future as opposed to just paying what's today. So if we choose option D, which option D is a great start, and I would be okay with that being chosen, I think option A actually puts us even further in the positive if we can swing it, because now we're actually preparing for future years as opposed to just for the next 3 years paying off what we can. So I would give some credo to option A if it can be swung. Can it be? Do we have enough? Do you feel comfortable enough with option A with our cash position?
This is going to go to finance, and it's going to be built into the recommendation for the budget process. And I would suggest that if you wanted to, as a facilities committee, you could certainly recommend to finance that ideally, option A should be enacted for the facilities department budget in capital asset replacement, but at a minimum, option D has to be budgeted. That way, when the budget is being prepared, I'm going to know that somewhere in that window, and when we get into the summer and we begin to see what revenues look like and what balancing is going to cost, and then we can report that back to you when the budget is presented in August, of how much of that we could do based on the other demands on the budget. I think it's highly unlikely that that general corporate will be able to afford $624,000 of new expenditure appropriation in fiscal 2014. But you could ask for that consideration to be given. Certainly, from this committee to finance.
I would, then, I know we don't have a motion on the floor, we should probably get one out. But what I would suggest, and maybe I'll be the starting point, is I'll move that we ask Finance Committee to actually approve option A and at a minimum, option D in terms of funding for 2014.
I would second that.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Gary?
We get a certain amount of new growth in the corporate fund annually. I don't believe it's 600,000. It's closer to maybe between 400 and 500. So option A 2014 would require us to dip into some other accounts, cut some other line items to achieve that, even if with the new growth. I've been advocating taking a percentage of the new growth each year and setting it aside and let it build on each year until we get up to maybe putting aside as much as 300,000 or 400,000 a year, and possibly even more. So that would be my one concern with option A, is that in the second year we're going to exceed our new growth and we'll have to dip into some other line items.
I have one more question. From option A to option D, there's a total 5-year cost difference of about, looks like about $280,000. If you sum up the five years, where is that roofs that we're not going to replace when we go from A to B or B
In
to C?
option A, we're amortizing for the future replacement of all roofs. In option D, we are not amortizing for the future replacement of all roofs in all 5 years. We only start that in the 4th year.
Okay, so, but we should be building up a cost on those roofs that are in the future for the 2 years where we don't, or those 3 years where we don't put in for them.
They become more expensive because we're not amortizing towards their future
So-
replacements.
So why doesn't that show up as a sum across the board so we're pushing $280,000 off into the future
Right,
is what we're doing?
right.
Okay.
At the end
Out
of.
beyond the 5 years,
At the end
yes.
of 2016, there will be nothing in reserve because you will have only replaced the 3 roofs that needed to be replaced in 14, 15, and 16. And there won't be any reserve for any future replacements under option D. Under option A, there are monies for those roofs that need to be replaced in the future, in addition to having replaced the roofs that had to be done in 14, 15, and 16.
I don't know if you looked at this, but does the number beyond the 5 years look pretty flat, similar to the number that in the 5th year?
Yeah,
130?
it
ish.
flattens out as
Okay.
you get there.
'Cause you're-
And if we had always had these roofs amortized appropriately since the beginning, and this was a spreadsheet you got last month, but this ends up with general corporate obligation at about $160,000 a year. If you had always amortized them, that dollar amount is at about 118, I think. I didn't bring that with me, but it's under 120 a year.
So,
And you're going to carry it at 168. It's higher. It's going to be higher until every roof has been replaced under an amortized schedule.
so how would you feel about a situation where, in order to hit these higher costs at the beginning, we spend fund balance with the commitment that as this number goes down over time,
We don't have fund balance to spend. We already have to borrow $1.5 million from the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund for general corporate to be able to cover cash flow until property taxes come in May or June. There are no other funds from which we can borrow, and quite frankly, I would rather we move away from having to borrow from public safety, which means we can't spend down the fund balance.
okay.
It's already just barely at our goal, our fund balance goal, and to take it below that would create cash flow issues for general corporate operations.
Okay, thanks.
If I may, I hear what you said, Mr. Kibler, but I'm still in favor of the last option, D, for the main reason it's realistic. This is just a starting point. There's nothing to say that after we see how it goes and how this year goes, and next year when we have a meeting, we can go back in and ask for more money to put into that fund. I just don't like coming in so big, knowing that we're not going to reach that. I don't see how we could reach that number, knowing what we know about the budget as it goes along. And there are other issues that have come up recently with the nursing home, but they have their own fund. But we all know we have emergency items in that. And I'm looking for something that's attainable, that can be there. And I guess, too, if we start putting too much money in at once, we know that most folks don't understand all of the dynamics of what a budget is and how we're budgeting for it. They're all going to say, well, you know what, I need new carpet, or I'd like one of them big screen TVs in my room, and I know you got that budget sitting there. So I'd like to start with the roofs, then have Alan, as we have discussed, add on with the other main things that we need and get that fund built up. And as we start building it, it'll be there and we can use it. And like I said, I've got jobs that I've budgeted for at my own business, and I've budgeted for doors, water heaters, what have you, but I'll shift things around because I know I can get a better price on this item this year than I will next year. So I like option D. It's attainable, it's easy. We can always fine tune it after we see how this goes and make sure that we can even get that in there. But your motion's on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Rachel?
I think it kind of follows up on what James said that I would feel more comfortable if all 5 years would add up to the same amount. So it's just a matter of timing of when we want to do it.
Are you talking about what Mr. Quisenberry said?
Yeah, so, because right now, if we go with a lower one, it might look nice, but we end up with nothing at the end of 5 years. So there are two things here, right? One is the timing of when we want to put the money in, and the other one, what do they add up to in terms of what we build for the future?
But if you look, I understand what you're saying, but if you look at fiscal year 2017 under option A, it drops from a contribution of 291,000 to 160,000. And under option D, you have to keep the contribution higher because you haven't done the future amortization. So from a budgeting perspective, I believe going in, it's probably easier if it's a flatter amount until we get to the point where we're better amortized.
Well, I agree. I just think that the one that's flatter has to be a little higher, so it achieves the same thing that options A and B would have been, that's all. So I agree with the idea that going flatter is easier to attain because you don't
Right,
have the
right.
spike, but right now it's flat and low, and at the end, if I understand correctly, we didn't
So what
amortize
you're-
the future.
what you're
So I would like
saying-
it flat and a little higher, so we can start building a little bit towards the future.
So you would want to include the amortization for all roofs.
Right, so
And that's-
at the flat, so it would be, I don't know, 320 instead of 300, or, I don't know what the number would be, but, so it would be manageable, but without saying, okay, we're only doing what we have to, and we still don't build anything for the future. But that's just my suggestion, that's all.
I said a minute ago, we're gonna have other items coming before us as time goes on, so we may have to adjust that accordingly. I understand exactly what you're saying, but these are just, as Alan told us up front, they're rough estimates. That roof may be able to go 5 more years, so keep that in mind. Quisenberry.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to side with Mr. James here on option D, mostly because I think we're going to get information in the next month or two about the HVAC systems, and we're going to want to think in terms of the whole, as Josh mentioned earlier. And so if we say we want A, that doesn't leave any room for any of the other things we're going to learn in the next month or two. So I'm leaning towards D myself.
So Ms. Schwartz and I are on a side here. I think at the end of the day, fiscal year 14, 15, and 16 in option D is basically kicking the can. At the end of 2016, we'll have no money for any sort of roofing replacement. I would like to see something. I don't care if it's $100,000 or $200,000, that is a start to me. But having a zero fund balance, well, theoretically, a zero fund balance after 2016 seems like we're not being as proactive as we should, because really option D is status quo until 2016. So I would like to see something, even if it's $100,000, or maybe we do $400,000 for 2014, 2015, and 2016. It's an increase of 80 grand. You're not increasing it by 200 or 300 grand, but it's something. And I think that is something I would like to see happen by the end of 2016.
This is going to complicate this a little bit more for you all, but the Capital Asset Replacement Fund doesn't just cover facilities. It covers technology needs, vehicle needs, and large capital needs for all county departments as well. In fiscal 2009, we had been able to budget for current and future reserve for all of those items. We have not been able to do that since 2009. So for all of those items, we are only budgeting for what has to be purchased in the next year until we can get enough allowance within the budget to be able to start budgeting for future reserve. So you have to be careful, I think, and realize that budgeting, trying to just balance this and budget an extra $100,000 for future reserve of roofs in this first 3 years is only going to eliminate that capability to rebuild what we previously had with having future reserve for all of our technology needs and vehicle needs outside of the sheriff's office for the general corporate fund departments, because all of this money comes from general corporate and goes into the capital asset replacement fund. So doing this where we're only budgeting for current for a couple of years is exactly what we have had to do with capital asset replacement for the last 3 years. And at this point, I am very interested, this is new. I am hopeful that we're able to do more with getting the other reserves back on track. When we had it on track, this fund had a little over $1 million of reserve money in it. It's down to 500,000. So we're going to start seeing real blips in budgeting there as big departments who have now no reserve for their technology, and it all has to be replaced next year. We have to budget for all of that. So this goes a little bit beyond just facilities in terms of moving the money from general corporate to the capital asset replacement fund. So just from my perspective, I'm very comfortable with the fact that we will replace the roofs that need to be replaced in the next 3 years under option D and still be able to see a decrease and start amortizing for all of the remaining roofs in fiscal year 2017.
Hey, one quick note, on the page 7, she lists the funds that will cover their own roofs, so we're only talking about certain buildings. The courthouse and other buildings will already have their own funding, and again, we know how the budget is, and I know you all like to see numbers, but we could sit here next year and say, we've done great, let's increase this a little bit and come back. I just don't want to make it so it's so unattainable, we're never going to get anywhere. And kicking the can, we can kick that can. We'll get it back. But I think that we ought to go with option D, but that's my thought. Rachel?
I think my thinking is more general concept of how to look at it rather than specifically. I understand what you're saying. So I think I would almost, I don't know that it would work in a motion, but conceptually I would like to see two numbers. One is here's what we should have and here's what we can have. And my concern is that when we're not going to look at what would have been nice to have, meaning, let's say 400,000 would be a steady state, that cannot be attainable now, but would have been a good number to have, then we're pretty much losing sight again of the ongoing maintenance that should be done. And then when we're going to be considering other projects that keep coming up, we say, oh yeah, we do have a little bit of money here left for this or that. You see, so it allows us to kind of forget about what we should be doing because we never look at it. So I would rather say, okay, it would be the responsible thing to do if we had the money would be to put X dollars into that fund every year. We can't do that because of constraints, so we're going to put X minus 200, but keep that in mind so when new money comes, when the sheriff wants this or this department wants that, we say, oh yeah, but if we do have a little bit of excess money, there was this maintenance fund that we would have liked to put money in. So that's really what I'm more interested in, is a bigger picture rather than specifically for 2014 budget to put that in. I understand we can't do that.
I understand. You also need to understand that in this capital asset replacement fund, we have to do this for the auditor, we track exactly how many dollars are placed into the fund for current replacement of every specific item and future replacement of those items so that each item carries a balance in the documentation that we maintain, so we know. And we know in the future, we will know if we end up not replacing a roof, but we have to replace an HVAC system, we're gonna be able to tell you, we have this much reserve for the HVAC, it's not enough, we have this much reserve for the roof, we don't need it all, we're going to transition some of that. So that's how it's managed, and because we don't know what that number is, because we don't know the HVAC numbers yet, we don't know the exterior maintenance numbers yet, again, this is just a starting point.
Any other questions? Patsy?
Mike's not on.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm much more comfortable now that I've heard some of the conversations, but I do want to underline a couple of points. I hope the title of this item is changed from roof fund to capital maintenance fund so that people don't just track that it's the roofs only. I'm glad to hear the chairman say that even he in his own business realizes there's times for flexibility on what might pop up to the top to be maintained, because I think, as Mr. Quisenberry mentioned, that we will be having quite a bit of learning toward the end of the month in our study session, especially from Mr. Fournier, who now is in the role of working with the Illinois State County Board Association, and his primary role is to help county boards figure out what they should be doing and looking for monies to do them. So that might cause us to shift around what we emphasize first rather than second or third. And the last aspect, I understand Ms. Busey's concerned about cash flow and the reserve fund. I would never argue to threaten that, but I would argue, along with the comment that Ms. Schwartz mentioned about the courthouse fund, that we keep in mind that if it really does save the county a considerable amount of money and far more than we're earning in interest as it's sitting there getting 1% and 2% interest, that we give serious consideration of using some of those monies if and when grant opportunities come along to us, and we can take advantage of that and gain on outside money coming in and gain on getting something done with a return rate that'll be more in the 5% and 6% return rate. Thank you.
Okay, so we got a motion on the floor and a second. Mr. Kibler wants to recommend option A, and at the least, option D. Am I correct? Which confuses me, but that's the motion, so I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of Mr. Kibler's motion, say aye. All opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion failed. So now we need another motion from somebody.
I'd like to move, we recommend option D, Finance Committee.
And we have a second. Any discussion on that option before I move forward? Seeing none, thank you. All in favor of option D, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving right along. As soon as I grab my glasses, because Patsy made my eyes fog up. That's all right. They don't know me. Approve the courthouse exterior maintenance RFP. Alan?
Thank you. Before I get into this too deep, I'd first like to take this opportunity to introduce Robert Kirkland, sitting back there, otherwise known as Kirk. He is the building and grounds supervisor, works with me out in the field, and he's going to help me put on a little presentation here. So he's going to step up, and we're going to go from there. Give me a second. I'll turn on the equipment. Okay, on page 11, I've prepared a memo for you, memorandum. I'm giving you a little bit of history about the courthouse exterior. The courthouse is considered one building, but it's really two different types of structures exteriorly. We have 1900 lime putty on the old section and brand new, well, huh?
It'll take a while.
It's warming up, I think.
Okay.
It's all got heat up. At least this part is coming on.
This one is up. You can see it.
Okay. It came on earlier this afternoon when we checked it. We get a tech guy in the back. But while we're waiting for that, okay? With that.
Go ahead.
Okay. With the two different types of exteriors on that one building, okay? The courthouse edition was completed in the spring of 2002. It had standard one-year warranty, modern technology, typical type of industry standards. Now, the old courthouse was finished, the exterior restoration was finished in 2010. And we, of course, we did a lot of work on the outside of it. After all the stone replacement tuck pointing were completed, a stone consolidator was applied, and also a water repellent. Both of them were by Prosco, and the water repellent has a has a multi-year limited warranty through 12/19 to your 2019. So we have to look at this as part of this building has got a partial warranty, some of it doesn't. Okay, if everybody understands that. Okay, and the entry screen wall, which is the curved wing in front of the entry to the new addition, we have already had failure to that, where we had efflorescence starting to show and we had bricks coming loose, which was part of the 2002 edition. And during the '09 exterior restoration, we had the contractor working on the old building, repair that, and then fix it back up. So we've already had some infiltration of water into some of the new addition also. Okay, now what we're going to do now is look at I looked at the exterior of the old building. And if you can see, I brought some photographs, and if everybody can see that now. What you're seeing here is all of this stone right here in the middle, has been taken out and replaced. And now we're seeing a small fissure already starting to show along that line right there. You can see that? Yeah, there you go, Kurt. Okay, that's just one, it's very small, but it's there. All right. Another picture, Kirk, please.
Now, is this the bell tower?
This is the south side of the old building. Okay, you can see right there another small section where we're getting water, and some of the mortar has came out, a few spots. Now, you got to remember, I use a telephoto lens. You can't hardly see them from the street unless you're looking at them, but that's where water's getting in right now. Another section up there, if you can see, there's a little bit larger fissure. Okay, that's about approximately ½ inch in width. Okay, and there's another stair step crack, if you can see that one there across that, and that's on the west portion of the south side. Small, but they can cause damage. And another one you're seeing right there is a missing joint out of the stone banding on the south side. Keep in mind, this was completed 3 years ago. It will be 3 years this summer. Now, I think there's another piece where you got a crack right above right up there, okay? Small fissure.
Now, is this stuff that tuck pointing mainly is what the solution is?
That is correct. The solution now is get these holes filled back up with the correct material. Now, this is on the west side. The west side is much better, but there are some spots that need some attention. And most of what I found was on the south side and west side, very little on the north or east.
So is this maybe a sun and weather exposure then?
That's a very good possibility. Obviously, the sun and weather has a lot to do with it. Okay, and then you can see some. It's possible some of that stuff was put in on first thing on Monday morning or 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and they were kind of hasty, but hopefully that didn't happen very often. Okay, now, if you can see, this is a photograph of the restoration project out of the blueprints, where the diagonal double hash marks, all that brick was completely removed and relaid during the restoration. And if you look back, it's kind of hard, but some of those fissures you're seeing now are coming up in exactly the almost same spot as they were before we did that, which makes it a little suspect to me. Okay? And then I think one more photo is, once again, the other banding up there on the top. You can see where some more of the double diagonal hash marks. And that's another section where most of these photos that you've seen, when we zoomed in, this is where this is occurring again. Okay? Real short show. That's it on that one. Okay.
Wow, and looking at those pictures, does that mean the headers above those windows are insufficient?
No, I don't believe so. You have to remember that this is a steel structure building, and the exterior is built from the foundation up. The headers are superficial, just for the exterior brick itself, and not part of the structure. Maybe there's still some shifting between the interior, their exterior. Maybe there's some shifting still in the foundation. I cannot tell you that right now. maybe all it needs is, we really heard it 3 years ago, maybe it's settled now, and if we tuck point them, it will be solid for a long time. I cannot answer that, but following my recommendation is that we go ahead for fiscal year 2013, capital projects is $125,000 for scheduled exterior maintenance of the courthouse. I recommend the County Facility Committee issue an RFP for the cleaning, tuck pointing, and water repellent of the old part of the courthouse, and cleaning and caulking and water repellent for the addition. Okay? And with the complication of the premature failure of the south side of the old courthouse and the existing warranty of the SL 100 water repellent, I further recommend that that the architect of record for the restoration project, either White and Borgononi, who were the principal, or IGW, who worked with them as field representatives and consultants, be consulted about these cracks on the south side. Take a good look at it, and then why we're putting this together. Okay?
Alan, I had a question.
Certainly.
Let's get a motion on the floor, and then we'll have questions.
Okay.
So does anybody want to make a motion?
I would make the motion with Mr. Reinhardt's recommendation. Second.
Okay, now we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Rosales?
Yes, you were saying you were looking at those cracks and they seemed kind of suspect. What do you actually mean by that?
Those cracks are in the same location that, if you remember the last picture I showed you of the blueprints, those cracks are reoccurring in the exact same location as they were before we completely took all the brick off and put it back on. So I just want to make sure that there's not something else inside that building or below the building that's actually causing that to reoccur again.
So it's not the craftsmanship of the construction of those sections, or is it bad material? I mean, this has only been 3 years, and some of the older spots have been there 100 or so years.
That is
So,
correct.
When you say suspect, is it because of the buses that are passing by on a consistent basis that's shaking the structure? Or is it the craftsmanship or the material being used?
Once again, I can't answer that now, but if you follow my recommendation, and we do consult with the architects who would look into that and try to determine, it is possible it was craftsmanship error. It is possible maybe they didn't have a good mortar mix through those sections, but odds are that if it happened twice in a 3-year period in the same section, I would think there's something more possibly that needs to be checked.
So the motion on the floor is to do what?
Mr. Kibler made or Josh made the motion on Alan Reinhardt's recommendation, and I think we probably should clarify that he contact the original architect, if you would.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is the second good with that? There you go. So there's the motion. We're gonna go ahead and let him contact the original architect on the project, and then proceed with getting the study then, and then also to go out for RFP for the work based on some
So
recommendations.
the study, how much is that gonna cost?
That, we don't know that until he talks to him, but he needs to talk to him. It's money well spent.
So
Rachel, that's fine.
I would think that we should talk to them first to see what the problem is before we do an RFP on the tuck pointing, because if there is a more fundamental, whatever that problem is, which I'm definitely clueless about,
And I think
then the
that's
tuck pointing, right, so there is more sequential nature here, not
That
the RFP.
That is correct. They will,
So maybe we should separate the motion to do the consulting, and then if they say that all you need is tuck pointing, then go for an RFP, but it might be premature to do that now, or
That's what
maybe
I
I
thought.
misunderstand.
If I could, but what you're doing is, and it follows your purchasing policy, is authorizing the release of the RFP. And Alan's recommendation is on page 12 of the agenda packet, and simply ask for approval to release the RFP, but prior to doing that, he's going to contact, and you're authorizing him to contact and work with the architect on the project to prepare the RFP.
Yes, and then the RFP will be prepared according to the architect's recommendation.
Right.
And then released. But we
But
don't
what if the
want,
architect says what you need is something totally different, you have a problem in your
well, then you
foundations,
can
it's
come
not
back
that
to us,
tuck
but we
pointing.
don't want to be holding up the process because we're getting into spring weather and you want to get this, it's going to take a while to get it all done.
So
I
we
mean,
can
come
pull
back.
back the RFP if necessary? If we
Well-
put it out and then find out we don't really need this, we need something else, then we're fine?
Well, Rachel, I would say that since the architect that did he's gonna have insight to it in his old notes. Like Mr. Rosales pointed out, we used to own the cattle bank, the housing authority did, and we were over that, and we did a lot of work on that thing, and due to the traffic and the way the ground was in the basement, there's a lot of factors that come into play. And the thing is, it needs to be done. You know, it's gonna need to be done, whether or not they say, you know, you've got a bad structure underneath or whatever, because we checked the foundation when we did all that work. I remember all the stories and the concrete that was down there. But if that worked, he's got to proceed one way or the other, and he's going to talk to that architect to see what would be the best remedy. But the bottom remedy is going to be at the least that we have to get in there, get it re-tuck pointed and resealed. So that's why we need for him to proceed. In this case, we're going to start hitting the rainy season, and the longer we prolong this, and that just sets it back that much more, and with this type of stuff going on, we'll have bigger leaks. And I hope that answers your question. Mr. Rosales?
And there was no warranty on that?
Well, there is,
Masonry
and we
work?
discussed that last time. Usually, when anybody does work like that, Mr. Rosales, there's a year warranty, but I will read you something, a year, generally. Most manufacturers
Tuck pointing.
depend, but there is a life on certain things, and I'm gonna read you this right now. This was I got it off the internet today, lucky me, because I'm getting so good at that. I had said something to Mr. Beckett. James said he hoped the work on the exterior lasts longer than 7 years, and we're talking about the bell tower and this other addition. Beckett said he had learned the coating should extend the life of the brickwork. It didn't say anything about the mortar or the joints or anything, but the brickwork for approximately 50 years. And that's the coating that we had put on there. So the coating seems to be holding up. It's doing its job. It's shedding the water off, but there's so many factors. How old's that building? 100 and some years old?
Yes.
You know, you gotta look at that, and things are gonna happen. But that's why that courthouse fund that I spoke about earlier, even though it looks good, you know, you start getting into jobs like this, you can drop several thousand in a heartbeat, so.
Well, that's why I was asking the question, that if we go ahead and get it repaired, would this happen a year from now? And then we will have to go through the same process all over again because we don't guarantee it over a year. And maybe there's something that's more suspect, specifically underneath those windows or underneath that specific section that has nothing to do with the tuck pointing.
Well, if I may, when they did that study, and Alan, jump in here, please, those gentlemen went up there and they had all the latest technology. They had different tools they were using. I don't remember exactly what they were called, Mr. Rosales, but they checked everything out from A to Z. And for a fact, they're the ones that found a lot of the bad bricks that we didn't even see or were even knowledgeable about at that time. And so I gave them, there was some tool they were using. They checked the whole face of it. They went over it. The architect that's done the work has done other outstanding work. I just think it's one of them things, you know, that's, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, we worry about things, but a tornado could come through or a small aircraft could hit it and we're gonna have to replace it anyway. I mean, I don't get too shook about that. I just know when it's bad and he's gonna get us the answer. But they can tell us that, you know, it's this and this and this, but that it's not a certain thing. It's like going to a doctor. And I think the people that did the work, and based upon all the stuff that I remember, they did a good job, real good. They really researched all that on the brick and the mortar mix and everything, but it's just one of them things. I had a crown put in and it fell out after a year. Dennis told me I had to pay again. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, you know, and again, I am no architect, but I have done some masonry, and this is a skirt structure around a steel structure. I mean, if it's cracking in the same places, it's probably something bigger than just the tuck point or the mortar failing. You know, so that would be my concern, and getting this architect in there, I think, that's the key first. And since the tuck point is gonna have to be done, you can prepare the RFP, but we can always refuse to pay, you know, once we get the responses, we can refuse to issue the contract, right?
That's right.
If we
This
decide
is an
that
RFP.
we need to start looking at the foundation or whatever the heck may be wrong with that 100-and-some-year-old building.
I sure hope we don't have to look at the foundation.
So do I. So do I.
Any other questions from committee members first? Kibler left, so Patsy, you're on the floor.
Okay. I look at a building like I look at the health of a body, and if you have architects who went this course and a problem repeats itself, It's not clear to me why we go back to the same architects and we do not get another opinion. We have the third-ranking civil engineering department in the country, and why we don't ask somebody, even give them, you know, pay them X amount, which would save us a tremendous amount of money in the long run, to come and look at the building and give us some advice on what is causing this repeat of the problem. Long before we get to the point of writing the RFP, we would get an amazing amount of information from them and build on that as to what you write as up as the RFP for this building. With all the equipment that you're telling me that was used to get this building, this should not be happening. And to then go back to the same people makes absolutely no sense, and a poor expenditure of our taxpayer dollars to repeat. You know, it's near the definition of insanity, you know, going back and then expecting a different solution.
Well, Patsy, if I may, when this was done, and if my memory serves me right, there was, and John Jay can allude to this because we argued about the money that was spent, there was an engineering firm that had started this process, and the bills just kept mounting up, and then midway through, or whenever this work was decided to be done, we hired this other engineering firm who came in, and they couldn't use the other engineering firm stuff. They had to redo a lot of their own stuff, mainly because of whatever architect things are in play, whatever agreements they have. They did assist somewhat, but it costed the county more money to get that done. I disagree with you when you say there ought to be a better way of doing. Our bodies, I go for a checkup, and the next day I could have a heart attack. Things change. I mean, realistically, it would be nice, and I think based on what we do have, and I think by working with these folks, they're going to be fair with us. I don't think always going out for another opinion's the best way, because they got to start from the ground floor up, because they're going to tell us, well, we can't give you an expert opinion unless we go all the way from the foundation up, and then we're going to spend all this money to know what we already know. And these folks have already done it. So in this case, I'm looking at it as we got two options there, but I like the one that the gentleman that did it, because they were top notch. At the time, I'm like John Jay, I don't like spending the money, but when you're talking, well, but problems are problems. I mean, they pop up all the time. And I think we need to stick and be consistent, because everyone's going to give you a different opinion. Every doctor will give you a different opinion. But you made your comment, and it's well taken.
Well, let me
Maybe.
follow up on it, and that is people who come in who are the firms have a vested interest in getting X amount of work and dollars. Somebody who has no vested interest is a much less biased opinion on what potentially could be the problem there. And we tend at the county level not to take that approach. And I really don't understand why that's the case. It won't cost any more money because we ask for a non-biased person to look at our problem. It's not another engineering firm. This is not somebody who has a firm.
Josh?
I tend to agree with you, Patsy, on the idea of maybe a second opinion, but I don't know that it's necessary yet. But I would add that, I mean, I used to work at civil engineering, and I've worked with a lot of professors and engineers over my life, and to be quite frank, to get them to donate their time and come out and check it, it's a lot of hard work. If you can convince a U of I engineering professor to come take a look at it, I would be more than willing to help, but I just don't think it's going to happen, for free especially.
Gary? Gary?
Then bring him by, please.
Microphone, please.
I have to be careful not to interject my old day job, but I suspect strongly you've got a foundation problem there. So that would be just what I've seen so far. I'd want to take a look at those plans and see what those footings look like and go from there.
Well, Mr. Maxwell, as I said in the beginning, when that was all done, when we tore the old tower down, it ended up that was the option. And when we got down to the foundation, it was well looked at. I think there was some minor work done on it from what I recall, but it was well in place. And at the time, they thought by disturbing it and redoing it we would shift that whole ground, and then that whole new concrete would have to settle. And based, years ago, things were done a lot thicker and heavier than they are today. But that was then. I mean, we can always second guess someone's work, but we do have a motion on the floor, don't we, Beth? If my memory serves me right, I'm slipping here. So we've got a motion on the floor to move ahead with this. Let Alan contact the engineering or architect firm that first did it, which I think would be a good way to go, and then put together an RFP if need be. So we've got a motion, so I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Moving on, we have info only at this point. Alan?
Thank you. I've supplied you with a little more history about some of the things that I have been working on. Page 13 of there's a memorandum explaining to you that I've been following the public sector energy efficiency programs through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity website, monthly, quarterly newsletters, and all update notices. Now, what I'm going to talk about now is a particular program from that department. Was started in 2001, focused on a natural gas incentive. This program seemed very enticing. I thought it was something that we could do in-house and without any extra funding. So I looked into it seriously. At that time, they had a flat rate incentive. Since then, starting January 1 this year, they almost more than doubled their incentive rates and changed the work. So a basic overview of this particular electric and natural gas boiler tune-up program. The application period was September through February 2009. You had the natural gas and blah, 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 200,000 size of boiler or larger. And the incentive value was either a $300 fixed rate or a $600 fixed rate per boiler, depending on what type it was, modulating or fixed rate, so on. But of course, there was a steam tap program, pipe installation rebatement, and then some of the parameters for it. So I contacted one of our reputable local mechanical contractors that we have a history with, and I asked them if they had someone qualified, and they had a guy who works on these programs specifically for other entities. I'm very familiar with the paperwork and all the documentation, and qualified to perform these inspections. I asked them to do the pre-inspection and take a look at 7 of the boilers that qualified for this program. Now, typically, and then we pay them out of the repair and maintenance line item from last year. Okay, that was out of our expenses. Now, this typical boiler for what we have is 80 to 82%, maximum 85% efficient, brand new, right out of the factory, set up on the floor. And I've shown you the results of their testing following the specifications set forth in the program. If you can see that 3 of the 7 boilers are slightly below standard. The other 4 are right there, I believe, where they should be, or close to. Maybe you might get 1 percentage or 2, but not much. So, and then I asked them to give me a price quote for what it would take for us to perform all the stuff required and finish it up. And their total cost for the proposal was over $17,000. At that time, with a rebate of $600 per machine and a total cost of almost $20,000, I did not think that was really going to be a cost-effective time and a payback that would be worthwhile, being this would only be a 1 to 2 year program where we should have them tuned up again. January 1, they come up, and this is very typical for what I've learned the last 3 years following these programs, is that the DCEO will issue a program the first year, and if they have funds left over they did not spend, all of a sudden, they'll double the incentive rates for the following year to try to use up the funds in that. And once again, they did that in the lighting program, and now they're doing it in the natural gas program. So for a short period of 4 months, 4 or 5 months, now we have a, what they call a double-up natural gas program. We are already prepared halfway through this program. We already have our what I call that, the pre-tune-up inspection and efficiency ratings paid for, and we have to have these done by May 15th. And they have changed the incentive from a flat rate of $600, which all boilers are modulating style, to a 75 cents per 1,000 BTU, up to $1,500 per boiler. Or I should have added 75% max of the total cost of the program, okay? So, once again, I contacted the mechanical contractor, Reliable, and asked them to requote following the new specifications, and then they resubmitted a total for all 7 boilers of $9,265. I do not think that the 4 boilers that are at or showing really good efficiency ratings are going to be considered a payback, being as typically 2 to 3 years we have to retune them again. So for cost of tuning up the 3 boilers that are not showing the best efficiency rating, that cost will be $4,085. Okay, now, total investment for this program by the county would be, on our part, would be $5,022.50. And our maximum total incentive, we cannot exceed of 75%. The maximum incentive the county could receive, can receive, if we are awarded, would be $3,766. Small investment, but for the county of $1,256. And we can recover that very, very quickly then. So this is one program I think that is worthwhile, and I think it's something we can handle in-house. And what I will do is I will ask the Finance Committee to apply for the program. I will pay for it out of the repair and maintenance line item, and I will ask the committee at Finance, when we receive the funding, to put it back into our repair and maintenance line items.
Anyone have any questions?
Just thank you for doing this, Alan. Great job.
Well, thank you very much.
And Alan, I thank you also, but in crunching your numbers, because you almost spent $3,000 up front to have the inspection done, is that included in the bottom line where we end up with 1,000 something?
That is included, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's information only. So Alan's gonna try his best to get that, but if we don't get the money, I will be talking to Mr. Hartke. Late at night. Any other questions or concerns on that issue? Okay, we're gonna move on to downtown jail priorities.
I'm sorry, I do not have anything to report on that. I have asked the sheriff and tried to contact him a couple of times to have them to see if he wanted to change the rating of the items remaining. He has apparently been very busy, as well as we have with the snow, so we just have not had a chance to get together. So I will try to get that information maybe and bring it back to the committee next month if that's what you would like.
Okay. Yeah, you were gonna get with him to see if we had any extra money, what his priorities may be as far as the.
Well, that's correct, of what was on the 4 items that were on the list.
So that, we'll just consider that an ongoing, and we'll leave it on. When you get the information, we'll talk about it. Is that fair with everybody? Thank you. Other business. Any committee members have any other business they'd like to bring forth? Seeing none. Chair's report. Basically, the only thing I was gonna tell everybody is I did get online. I've mentioned it twice, but looking back, I think sometimes the new people, and even us that have been here, but I know John Jay's gonna remember this because his mind is, it's working. But we had talked back in 2010, and this was about a capital improvement projections for roofing. And Ms. Busey spoke regarding the need for the county to develop a capital facilities replacement improvement plan. So here we are talking about it 3 years later and still talking about it, and she talked about setting money aside, but anybody can go online and just start looking from '09 all the way up to present date, click on the facilities tab. it's amazing when you look back and you start looking at all this stuff and how it, you're right, the can's been kicked down, but it's always been because we'd never set it in stone and said, let's do it, let's get it going. My goal in life is a little is better than nothing. You get it growing, and then you take off from there. I've seen too many items, even in my own line of work, where I wish for the moon, and then I get very disappointed because I don't get the moon. So if I start a little smaller and work with it, you'd be amazed how soon it grows. So I'm hoping that we all do that, and like it was pointed out tonight, we are still gonna have to be looking at HVAC. Alan's gonna be getting on that with his staff. I think they'll do us a good job, even based on some of this other stuff I've been seeing. But I'd rather it be complete and done in segments. And again, I stress, I don't like taking on a whole bunch at one time because we need to tackle what we have. Fighting fires all the time, all you do is chase your tail, and that's why you end up where we're at. So with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the closed minutes, do we need to deal with that?
That's, I was getting to that next after my report. You're fine, you're fine. So semi-annual review of closed session minutes. Deb, you want to speak to that, please?
Well, you have the memo from Mr. DeThorne, and Mr. Maxwell has a motion that would enact Mr. DeThorne's recommendations, which is consistent with both the statute and the county board's resolution on when to open closed session minutes.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to the statutory requirement to conduct a semi-annual review of all closed meeting minutes, I move that the closed meeting minutes of the County Facilities Committee be maintained as closed to protect the public interest or the privacy of individuals, with the exception of the minutes from April 26, 1990, November 6, 2001, December 10, 2002, January 6, 2004, May 4, 2004, June 8, 2004, August 11, 2009, which may now be determined as open session minutes. Thank you.